Let's play a new board game. At the center of it all is artificial intelligence and everything that it learns and generates. The players go through 4 different stages, and of course, at every stage, there's money involved. But there's a catch. The players are at the game, but there's no rulebook. AI is becoming fast, ubiquitous, and indispensable, with only parts of existing intellectual property and criminal laws to protect its stakeholders. So, if we were to write a rulebook for this exciting new board game, what would go into it? Let's find out. Here are the players. 1. The data providers. Artists, creators, and common people whose data, that is text, art, voice recordings, and so on, is used for AI models to learn. 2. The developers. These are the people who use this data to train the models to perform specific tasks. 3. The consumers. Common people like you and me, or businesses and companies that use the models to make their work easier. At this first stage, the data providers create or provide data and the developers collect it. A couple of things could go wrong here. Sometimes developers collect data without permission from creators. Copyrighted content is used to train models. Large language models like GPT learn from scraping the millions of websites on the internet. Earlier this year, media companies like the New York Times and The Guardian changed their terms and conditions such that their copyrighted content can no longer be part of the training data for AI models. The Copyright Act of 1957 does not mention copyrighted works and their use in the training of AI models. Sometimes, data providers don't even know that they are data providers. Developers breach privacy and collect users' data without informed consent. This is a violation of people's rights under the new Digital Personal Data Protection Act 2023, and in such cases, when people realize that their private data is being used to develop AI models, they can exercise their right to erasure. Through this, they have the right to demand that their data be deleted, no questions asked. This act, however, does not apply to information that has been made available on the public domain. At other times, developers don't pay the creators properly.
When we're thinking about data, it's also really important to think about where that data comes from, because data is an extremely lucrative asset. We need to rethink what data ownership means and really what that data value chain looks like. Just for context, there's often a multiple, like 200-300x decrease between the actual value of the data and the value of the work that is attributed to most data labelers, right? We are one of the only people in the world that is actually paying a minimum of $5 or 400 rupees an hour.
There is also no provision that gives units of data a monetary value. Therefore, companies can choose to underpay the data providers. Once data is collected, it is used in the training of the AI model. A lot of the time, this data is extremely biased. For example, a paper recently published by Aapti Institute talks about the deployment of AI in predictive healthcare. Doctors in India may typically diagnose heart attacks based on symptoms found in men. AI models could misinterpret such data to mean that heart attacks are not as frequent in women. To take it a notch further, Indian law enforcement is also working on using AI models to predict and prevent crime. This often takes the shape of identifying people from minority communities as criminals. Predictive policing puts into question the fundamental right to equality. People identified by such policing algorithms will be surveilled under the assumption that they're likely to be guilty.
The idea behind predictive policing is to, train an AI system on, decades of police data and police information to then almost stop crimes before they happen. The underlying data in itself is biased, and I think, especially over the last 4 years, we've seen how, policing in the US has a significant bias against people of color.
There's also a question of, whether it adheres to all the principles of a criminal justice system, which is supposed to be fair. Does the predictive policing system in any way negate some of the criminal justice principles? And I think that is something that you should be taking into consideration before, before deploying these systems.
The deployment of AI models is widely being done in fields like healthcare, agriculture, and education. a few things need to be considered. An AI model could make a discriminatory decision. AI systems may also be vulnerable to cyber attacks and hacking. This could expose sensitive data and compromise privacy. Companies that deploy AI need to be held accountable for any harm that it causes. And companies could find it difficult to recover from such lawsuits, and they need to be protected by liability insurance. There is, of course, the problem of lack of equal access. A lot of people cannot afford emerging technologies. For example, AI-driven climate change mitigation technologies can be too costly for developing countries, further exacerbating existing inequalities. This process of deployment needs to be regulated such that all groups get fair access to new technologies. This is the final stage. People like you and me use AI to make our lives easier. Without a rulebook, a few things could go wrong. Say you use generative AI to create a piece of music. Who really owns it? Whose intellectual property is it? Does it belong to you? Does it belong to the person who built the model, or the people on whose art the model was trained? The Copyright Act of 1957 defines the author of different types of art, and this definition does not include AI models. So what happens to AI-generated work? We need a law that tells us exactly who owns AI-generated work. While using an AI model, the user's data is collected. Consumers need to be made aware of this, and they need to be given the right to choose what happens to their personal information. Consumers also need to be made aware of the possible errors and biases that an AI model might make, so that they can use it more mindfully. The most important thing we need in the rulebook is a regulatory body, someone to examine the game and identify where things are going wrong and how they can be corrected. The Telecom Regulatory Authority of India recommends the creation of an Artificial Intelligence and Data Authority of India (AIDAI) to develop and regulate the use of AI in the country. The Niti Aayog in 2021 released an approach paper with principles for responsible AI adoption in India. But none of this has been enforced. Once the rulebook is written, the game will move forward much more smoothly. Until then, however, it is upon the players, the data providers, the developers, and the consumers to use AI responsibly.